Hey, so today's day two. Can you guys all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So what I'll do is I'll just go through some slides, and today is a little bit more hands-on than we did yesterday. And really where we're leaving off, yesterday we did a mini homework assignment. I guess you could call it mini. It might not be mini to you. I guess sometimes it isn't to me. But the doorway into our mindset and our thought processes and trying to create new behaviors and positive change in our life, there's two doorways that I've found to be the most effective in doing that. And it's either looking through our finances and our spending habits and whatever those habits are around money, because we interact with it every single day. And it's very cross contextualized to everything in our life. It's connected to our health, to our relationships. And so that's one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it is going through your daily routine, really tracking every single minute of your day and tracking where are you spending your time. And I wanted to use finances and money as the foundation for this particular workshop and using that as a gateway into really accessing positive change in really any area of our life. And so yesterday we ended with an assignment of going through all of our expenditures, all of our credit card statements, PayPal statements, banking statements, and really going through that with a fine-tooth comb and seeing how is things going in, how are things coming in, and just evaluating all of that and trying to put everything into a category. That was kind of like the first phase of this. And then we're going to build on top of that assignment. And I think I mentioned that I was going to do this with everybody. And I have to admit, I got through a huge chunk of it and I still have some more work to do. So I'm going to be finishing up that part of my assignment for myself this evening because it is really powerful. And I find that doing it on a regular basis really carries a huge impact. So leading into today, that's kind of where we're starting here. So let's see. So I know we're missing a couple people from yesterday, so we're just going to kind of go with this. But if you had any thoughts, if you were able to do the assignment, or maybe you've done this before, where you've gone through um, your finances and tracked everything, did you notice anything either in this particular assignment or in the past where you really came to some sense of awareness, where you noticed something that maybe kind of slipped under the radar or something that just wasn't really noticeable, maybe went on for months, or I had one particular expense that came out and I didn't realize it was a yearly membership fee that I was paying for like a special grocery service or something. And it was charging me once a year. And even though I was regularly checking on my expenses, somehow this slipped through the cracks. And I realized a year and a half later that I had been charged two times without even using the service. So this is just kind of process of creating some awareness around how much do I can have control over my life, and having that awareness can really lead into creating positive change. So if you want to share anything in the chat, you're welcome to. Um, I definitely notice things that I was unaware of. So if you noticed anything and you want to share that, if there was like an aha moment or something, you're welcome to do that. And I have the chat over here on my other screen, so I'll just be occasionally looking over if you want to share anything there. Okay. So self-awareness is really that one of the first steps. I talked yesterday about how starting with curiosity, having a curious perspective when we enter into a situation where we're looking to maybe create some type of impact, whether that's in our own lives or in somebody else's life. And starting with that curiosity is really that baseline. And then once we get into a curious state, we can then build this self-awareness. And I mentioned yesterday how it's similar to having blinders on, just like a horse we see, and they can only see so much. And once we start to be curious, we start to give ourselves permission to start lifting those blinders and allowing ourselves to see other possibilities and what else might be there that we're not noticing. Sorry, I was just noticing I have chats here. And I don't know if that's coming, I don't know where it's coming from. That's kind of weird. If it's one of you guys, it looks like it's under my name, but I'm not sure why it's coming up like that. So
Name.
I'm sorry, what's that?
They're all showing your name.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah, it might have been the link you sent when we checked in. It might have, because even our photos had your name.
Oh, that's really weird. It didn't do
Hmm.
that yesterday. I'm
No,
realizing that there's like so many features on Zoom and I'm quite clueless about most of them. So I apologize.
no, that's okay. But yeah.
So somebody said agree. Okay. Um, Yeah, so talking about that limited time to cancel, yes. And it's so actually interesting with this is that I found myself with just kind of going back to the comments, whenever I found that I was in a situation where I was past a deadline or maybe the policy, I felt like I was restricted by the policy. I found that based if I could leverage my communication skills and my confidence, that I was able to actually bypass a lot of those policies and things because I felt like I was justified. You know, if I didn't pay for something, then perhaps I have some negotiating power and getting a return and refund for that. So I've used that method many, many times going beyond like that timeline. So that's kind of an exercise of exercising your, um, I guess, your confidence in yourself, um, your self power and your ability to leverage your negotiating skills. So let's see, going into, oops. Okay. So today's main topic is about how do we come into alignment, and some of the things that we talked about before was our belief system and our values and our environment. And so it's really quite, this is a lifelong journey of coming into alignment. And so we might not ever get to 100% alignment. I don't believe that's possible before we end this journey. But the more we can become aligned, the more we can feel ease and comfort in our life and things just things just go more quickly. I had mentioned yesterday that whenever we start to train our brain in a way to like help us reach our goal, it can take a little bit of time in the beginning, but then when your brain and your system starts to trust you and see that you have the tools and you know what to do, then that positive change actually happens a lot more quickly. So today's focus is mainly on how do we come into alignment? And we can do that by, again, what I mentioned is starting with an attitude of curiosity, because today we are going to be digging into some of those beliefs and our thought processes and how that might be keeping us stuck. So, if we can approach that with an attitude of curiosity and self compassion and a judgment free lens, sometimes there could be a part of us that comes in and tries to shame us or make us feel bad for mistakes or things that we've done in the past. And if we can just ask that judgmental part of ourselves, if it can just sit on the sidelines or right beside us and just allow us to maintain that curious and compassion, that self-compassion that we have internally. So I have the 5 pillars of alignment. And the first one, and one of the ones to make the most easiest impact, I believe, is in the environment. So we also have values, beliefs, behaviors, and skills. So one of the questions that can be such a simple question, but really powerful is, have I created an environment that is setting me up for success? And I think I maybe gave an example yesterday, but I basically had a friend that I made that really I resonated with on so many levels. We had a lot of the same problems, some of the same roadblocks. So I felt like I had this connection with her because we could relate to one another. But then what I found moving on is that we both got so tied up in our stuff that we both had a hard time seeing past it, right? Because we had the same things. And so I had to create some type of boundary, some kind of distance in our friendship because I didn't have the mindset, the resiliency internally to resist what I was taking in from her personal belief system and her model of the world. And so creating some type of barrier, at least temporarily, can really have a huge impact. And we have to ask ourselves, who are we surrounding ourselves with? Do we have anybody in our environment that can validate that what I want to achieve is actually possible? And this I find to be a really critical step, and it's something that really can take a very small effort. We can just pick one area of our life or maybe one particular relationship where we see maybe some need to set some type of boundary, even if it's just temporarily, until we can focus and work on ourselves and building the mindset. And so for me, I got to the point where I realized I kept sinking lower and lower into my stuff that I had to finally say enough is enough. I really like this person. I think they have good intentions, but this is just not benefiting me in this point in time. So I have to put a stop to this and just work on myself, and then I'll figure out what to do next. So the next thing is getting into our values. And this is probably something that most or if not all of you are familiar with already, is what is my internal values? And that's honestly very tied to our belief system. But if we can understand our values, it can really help us make positive change and help us shift and pivot towards whatever goal it is that we have in our life, whether it's in health, in relationships, or in finances. So the first thing, this is just an interactive thing for us to do, and you don't have to share what you come up with, but what I like to tell people is the key to getting to your values is in your unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind works by bringing the first thing that comes up to your mind. So when I ask you to write down the 5 things that are most important to you, the first 5 things that come up immediately, those would be the most unconscious. So if you can just take a moment, and I apologize, I can't see anybody's faces right now, but if you can just let me know in the chat if you did this and if anything came up for you, just take a moment to work on that. Okay. Okay, you both did it. Okay, awesome. All right. Now, I'm just curious, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but was money on your list of those 5 things? This, you're free to answer. Yes. Okay. Okay. So were either of you surprised at what you saw as your values? Was that like did you get some like new aha moment, or were you kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I already kind of knew this. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So what's really powerful, so I think you both said here makes sense. Yeah, and it does make sense. And so, what I learned about values with myself, and in working with other people, is that really the telltale sign for our values is really, do we have evidence of that in our behavior? Because many people, what I find is really actually quite fascinating. A lot of people say that money is really important to them. And this, I'm not saying this is either of you, but this is something that's very common because obviously we need money to pay bills and to take care of lots of different things. But then do we have evidence that money is important to us in our behaviors? And this is where that financial tracking assignment that we started yesterday can be really powerful because we can look at our bank statement, at our credit card statement, and look and see what our history is and do our actions back up what we say is important to us. And if we see some type of misalignment in what we're saying versus what we're doing, then there's some clue that somewhere, either in our environment, in our values, behaviors, or in our skill set, that there's some mismatch there, and that there might be an opportunity to work in one of those areas to bring that into alignment. And I think one of the slides I covered yesterday was if I'm not getting what I want, then perhaps my focus isn't on the right thing. I have to be willing to ask myself, am I maybe focusing somewhere else? And if I would like money to be on my list, or if I notice in my behaviors it's not really showing, I don't really have a lot of evidence that it's important to me or a focus for me, is that something that I'm willing to make a priority? And what's I think I maybe alluded to this yesterday as well, that our values don't stay static. They actually change throughout our whole lifetime. Now, if you look at, a 10-year-old kid or maybe a 5-year-old kid, they don't really understand money so much and they might not really care about money. If you ask them if do you want to go here or would you like some money? Money's not important, but as we get older, money tends to shift up onto the priority list. And so that's a fluid process, and we actually have complete control over how those things are prioritized. And this was a conversation I had with a friend of mine. He was 25 years old. He made his first $1 million in 1 year, and he was quite proud of himself, and he should be because he worked really hard. And he said to me one time in a conversation, "Show me your bank account and I'll show you what's important to you." And that really stood out to me because really, like they say, actions speak louder than words. And I realized even though I was taking action and I was looking at looking at my finances, I really had a lot of opportunity to bring my values and my belief system and my behaviors into alignment. There was a really big gap there. And so that is honestly, like I said, a process that we work on and evolves throughout our lifetime. But if we feel like we're stuck and not reaching our goal, then this is really a very powerful question. So some of the questions, it's really important to really focus on what is our goal and our intention. If we have some type of focus, even if it's just consciously, where we set focus and then we work on the unconscious things on the sidelines. But do we have a focus on what we want to accomplish? Is it to build wealth? Is it to learn a new skill? Maybe to help us in that particular area? Is it to clear out old beliefs that maybe we are or aren't aware of? or to develop a new habit or behavior. Maybe we recognize that we're in this cycle, or we recognize, or maybe we see evidence that there's something that's not quite working the way we'd like to, and we just don't have clarity about it. So what is it that we would like to work on and focus on? And if there's something that comes to mind for you specifically, for you and your individual goals, write it down. There's something really, really powerful about writing down what it is that we want. And then that kind of gives your brain permission to start collecting some evidence, start giving you direction and the tools and resources to start doing that. So next we're going to get into the belief system and how we can bring that into alignment. One thing that I've recently discovered, which really absolutely changed my life, I hear a lot of people say, and maybe you've felt this way before, that I don't have confidence or my confidence is low. Maybe you've heard somebody else say the same thing. And what I realized is that there's no such thing as a lack in confidence, because confidence is a core characteristic that we are all born with. I believe that we are all given certain qualities and characteristics. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, what am I confident in? And this can really start to change your frame of mind and mindset, because if somebody is confident in their belief system or their ability to not do something, if somebody's confident in the fact that they're not smart enough to do something, then it makes sense that they're going to struggle to accomplish that goal. But you have the confidence. How can we shift or pivot that confidence to focus in a different area, maybe one that benefits us or serves us in a way that would be advantageous? And this really, I love graphs and math because I'm kind of like a geek and nerd. But this is about, I apologize, my thing's in the way. Leveraging net income. So the red line represents where our spending is, and the blue line represents hypothetically where our earnings are. And so what's really interesting and what I find with a lot of people is that we have a lot of control over how high the blue line goes and how low or how high the red line goes. And there's this income gap or like wealth gap that some people call. And this wealth gap is really your key for creating wealth. So if you listen to a lot of really wealthy, successful people, they all talk about how can you create a gap between these two so that you can start leveraging that, and so your money can make money for you, so that your money can do the work for you and do all the heavy lifting. And what can tend to happen is that our belief system can keep this blue line low. So we have all of these thoughts and limitations that tell us, oh, I can't ask for this much money, or I can't ask my boss for a raise, or whatever the thing might be. And then we have this red line down here that sometimes the gap can be a bit narrow, and sometimes it's just as simple as like doing the exercise we started yesterday. Where am I overspending, or where am I spending money in things that aren't serving me? And it's not about pinching pennies and living this really miserable life because we're focused on being in lack. No, that's not the point here. The point is, if I understand why my lines are where they are and why I don't have the gap that I need, what thoughts and limitations am I placing on myself or receiving from my environment that's keeping this gap so narrow? Let's see. So I think of a belief as a thought or idea that is held to be true or absolute. It's like a rule that we have in our system. And by all means, we all have rules and beliefs about our ethics and what's ecological. And if we have a background of faith, absolutely keep every single belief that works for you and that is true to you and your core. But I would love to encourage you if you have a belief or thought or rule that you're living by that may not be serving you, start by asking the question, what else can I believe? What other possibilities do I have? So these beliefs again are very fluid and can change at any moment. So reiterating what we talked about a little bit yesterday, we can take beliefs on. It's actually very easy for us to accept beliefs from our peers, from our family, from culture, from religion even. I have heard so many limiting beliefs, not to pick on religion, but I am particularly, I come from a background of faith, and I grew up in a household that was faith-based. And what's really fascinating to me is we societally and in religion have adapted a lot of beliefs around money that are, in my opinion, contrary to what our Creator says about wealth. And so, where are we getting these belief systems? And are they doing us any good? Are they really helping us achieve our purpose? And social media, there's so many different places that we could be exposed to these. So I think this is actually really fun to do. So if you have any characters, either from your childhood that you remember, or maybe some films or movies that you've seen in your adult life, is there a particular character that comes to mind? I know I have a couple, but I would love if you want to share it in the comments. A couple of characters that come to mind that were wealthy or from the perception in the film, they had a lot of wealth and money, but they also had a lot of negative qualities and characteristics. So maybe they were a villain in the film, but they were also wealthy and rich. So if there's a character that comes to mind, I'd love to see it in the chat, and I'll share what I came up with from my experience. Does anybody come up for you guys? I'll share mine if not. Devil Wears Prada. I haven't seen, well, maybe I have seen it, I just don't remember. So there's a character in that movie that is connected to wealth, but also I'm assuming has some really negative or like evil characteristics. Yeah. So there might be some other things that you can remember from your past that might come up. I remember for me, one of the main characters that stuck out is, let me see. Oh, I don't know that one. Oh, okay, the head of Vogue magazine. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that person. Isn't it interesting though? So, uh, I don't know who that is either. From Die Hard. Okay. I'm trying to remember. I'm not a huge movie buff, so a lot of my references are like from kid films, either from my childhood or from my kid watching movies. Yeah, so we could probably list a lot of different characters. So this might be one that I don't know if you guys remember. I always thought about Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. She, loved the really nice clothes, the fur coats, had the really fancy car, but she had a lot of negative qualities and characteristics. And probably the number one that came up for me is Scrooge McDuck. So he was kind of like a spin-off of Ebenezer Scrooge, but he was this grandfather duck from DuckTales, and he would swim in this whole pool. He had this giant, like, indoor pool of gold coins in his house. And I remember being 5, maybe to 8 years old, watching these cartoons all the time. And that's what stuck in my mind the most is this guy is super greedy, doesn't really care about anybody, and he has a lot of money. And so it's really interesting how we can take in some of these ideas unconsciously because we just watch a movie and it's there. We're getting information. Now, what we do with the information is obviously up to us. I can definitely say from talking to other people and as well as just observing myself, I've made observations around other people and have made conclusions based off of money. And it could really apply to anything, to health. I had a lot of things. I adopted other people's belief systems around what I shouldn't do. And I got to the point where I realized it wasn't really helping me get anywhere. I was still stuck. And so I had to discard those old beliefs that I was carrying around so I could form my own true version of that belief system. And so what we'll find is that this we'll take all of these beliefs from all of these different places and we'll put this in this like hypothetical backpack and we'll carry it around for our whole life. And then we realize that we are stuck with all of this stuff and we don't know what to do with it. And it really creates this kind of burden, and we feel like we're lugging around something that doesn't belong to us or doesn't feel true or authentic to ourselves. And so the good thing is that we can at any time discard any of these beliefs. We can empty out this backpack whenever we want. So I made this illustration because I think it's like one of the best examples for understanding how beliefs are formed. So imagine beliefs as you're creating some type of brick wall, some type of fortress, or something that has strength and fortitude. And the way that we do that is we collect evidence. So we have some kind of thought that comes into our mind. And then we go throughout our life. It starts like with a seed, like a plant. We start with a little bit of information. Hey, I'm wondering if this is true. We ask ourselves something similar to that. And then our brain starts looking to validate, is this true or not? And so we start to collect evidence to support that belief or to disprove it. And based off of the evidence we find, that belief becomes cemented in, whether it's opposing or in incongruence with that belief. And so we can find that we create this really thick, strong wall. And we might get to the point where this belief maybe made sense 20, 30 years ago, but now we're kind of like in this place where we don't really need that belief or it's not really serving us. And so my thought process is if you want to start to break down the layers of that wall, because it is a process of layers, we reverse engineer how that wall was built in the first place. So if we built these negative beliefs or limiting beliefs with evidence from our surroundings, from our experiences, then the exact same thing is true about building positive beliefs. That if we want to have a different experience, if we're not accomplishing our goal and we realize that there's something blocking us or that we believe it's not possible, then we have to be willing to shift our focus to create or to start noticing evidence to support that new belief system. So a lot of the beliefs that I hear, and they really cross contextualize in any area, but a lot of the ones specific to money is the root of evil. Money is very tied to evil in general. There's let's see, what else do I have? Yeah, I heard this a lot also. Money doesn't grow on trees. So those are things that we've heard from our past. If I start to earn more money and I start to accumulate more wealth, then I'm worried that I'm going to start losing friends and family, and then I'm going to create distance with my community. That is a very big concern. So we have all of these things and stories and rules that we live by and that we tell ourselves that really keep us from having what we deserve. There's absolutely no reason that we can't have them. And I love this picture because positive thinking is something I'm sure you've all heard, and it's very big in the coaching industry. It's very big in personal development. And it's something that we might have even been told growing up as a child, that we just have to think positive. Just, you have to just think differently about your situation. It's like just snap your fingers and everything, all of our problems go away. But what happens is that people find that they try that, maybe they repeat positive thoughts to themselves, but their situation doesn't change. And the reason why is because if you think about vanilla ice cream, right? If you pour chocolate syrup on vanilla ice cream, it's still vanilla ice cream. Your brain is still going to know the difference. It doesn't get tricked into believing that it's suddenly chocolate ice cream. And the same thing goes for our thought processes. You can't trick your brain into thinking positive. But what you can do is, like we talked about earlier, is if you can get to the point where you understand what the limitation is, maybe what was the purpose or intention that it had at its original state, and then how do we reverse engineer that and create evidence to support what we would like to believe about ourselves or our environment? So I personally love examples and stories and things. So I'm going to share this brief story about Julia. Julia had this one particular food item, and I really relate to her because I shared yesterday, I was only eating 10 foods for 7 years, and now I can eat whatever I want. And so Julia was in a similar circumstance, although she was only restricting herself to based off of limiting just a few foods out of her diet. And she was 100% convinced that this one particular food item was causing her a lot of problems. So she had created a lot of evidence, or she had discovered a lot of evidence to support this belief that she had about her particular situation. And so I don't give health advice or tell people what to do in their particular situation, but what I do is challenge the belief system. So I asked Julia, is it possible that your problem is connected to something else other than the food item? And so Julia went away for a certain amount of time, and then she came back to me and told me that, oh, she doesn't actually have a problem with this food item at all. That she can eat it all the time and there's absolutely no repercussions from it. And so this is a testament to how powerful our thought process is. What kind of evidence are we gathering to support what we want to believe in? And so just to kind of keep this like I guess more engaging and things, if you have a guess, if you want to put in the chat, how long do you think it took for Juliet to break that belief that she has? Was it 1 week, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, or 12 weeks? Put what you think in the chat. 3 weeks, six. Yeah, so those are great guesses. It actually took Julia 1 week to break that belief system. Now, I'm not going to say that that's going to be the same for every person, but that's just one possibility. That's just one version of how quickly that you can change your thought thought process about a particular situation. So Julia already had a pretty good foundation and framework and had really done a lot of work on understanding her thought process and really doing some self-discovery and journaling and things like that. And so she got to the point where she was able to trust herself and she broke this belief in 1 week. So I really applaud her for doing that. It was pretty phenomenal. Okay, so let's see, where are we at on time? Okay, so we're getting to the end here. Just a couple more minutes. So the last pillar that I'll be talking about is behaviors. So I love this quote once you are aware. So part of what we did in this exercise and doing our values and discovering some of our beliefs, I'm sure that came up and some of the stories that maybe we got around wealth and money is once we are aware, once we can see the problem, it's no longer a habit, it is a choice. So I really love how easy it is for us to take back our power to choose. But we have to get to that point where we realize what we're doing isn't working for us anymore. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time. Unfortunately, sometimes some of us, like for me, I had to hit rock bottom where I realized, hey, like nothing I'm doing right now is working. I need to really make a huge change here and try something else. So getting into I would say phase two of the homework assignment. So I'm going to be doing a little bit more of mine this evening because I wasn't able to finish all of it. But going in and you can either take a picture or write down these questions. Ask yourself, is what I'm spending my money on right now, looking through all of your line items and ask yourself, is this giving me joy? And it might take a little bit of time, or you might have to take, some quiet space just to meditate on that and ask yourself, is this really giving me joy? Like, is this really serving me? And then ask yourself, what purpose is this serving? And then lastly, am I trying to prove something by exercising or by spending my money in this way? How am I using my finances and my wealth building tool? And am I using that to somehow prove or validate something about myself? And if the answer to that question is yes, then the next part of that would be asking, what is that? And it might not become apparent immediately, and that's totally okay. But starting with that question and that curiosity is that initial phase for creating change. And so as you go through your finances and through your expenses, just notice if there's anything, any shifts, anything that maybe you can become aware of is, hey, maybe I can make a little shift or I can improve in this particular area. And it really just starts with very small steps. And we'll get into uncovering more of this going into tomorrow. But some of the things that these are just a couple of the ideas that I have, is canceling subscriptions. I think when I really did a thorough look and went through all of my expenses and did the homework assignment that I'm giving to all of you, I think I came up with upwards of like around 250 to $300 of things that I was spending money on that I realized that it was kind of like nice to have, but it really wasn't serving me. It really wasn't helping me get to my goal. And so that was gap in my a huge gap that I had. And I thought based off of my belief system and how I thought about myself that I needed to have these things. I convinced myself that I did. Also, selling old items. Do we have things around the house that we're holding on to that maybe they're even depreciating, or things that we don't need and just sit and collect dust? Can we sell them and just even getting rid of some old stuff can feel really freeing. And also creating a solid emergency fund. So this is something some of you might have already done, but this could be one small step that you can take in moving towards your goal. Getting out of debt. There's lots of tools and methods out there. I'm not a financial advisor, but there's so many different ways to leverage debt and overcoming that. So to help you really accelerate and increase your income gap there so you can have more of that wealth building tool. And then also investing. There's lots of different tools and resources out there for investing. And I have a slide going into more of that tomorrow and how even small bits of change, not change like money change, but even a small shift in your spending habits and earning habits can really make a huge impact. So if you have any questions or thoughts, we're going to be getting into day 3 tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And then if there's anything that you would like to uh, talk about, let me stop the recording here. Let's see.